At 14:32 local time, this Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter is climbing skyward carrying weapons that shouldn't exist. Underneath each wing hangs an American GBU-62 JDAM-ER bomb, mounted onto NATO ejector racks jury-rigged with voltage regulators and electrical tape. In 15 minutes, this Cold War relic would thread through the most lethal air defense network on Earth to deliver 1,000 pounds of GPS-guided democracy onto a Russian ammunition depot. The S-400 search radar that's been watching him suddenly shifts to tracking mode. The tone in his headset changes from intermittent chirps to a steady warble. He's been acquired. At this range, the system's 4.8 and 6 missile can reach him in 62 seconds. He triggers the chaff dispenser, metallic clouds blooming behind the MiG as he dives hard, trading altitude for speed. But the chaff creates an unexpected problem. The radar bloom doesn't just confuse the S-400, it lights up every passive sensor within 100 kilometers. Soon, a roving Su-35 patrol is vectoring from the northeast. The dive takes him through 25,000 feet, airspeed building to 600 knots. The S-400 lock brakes, its radar struggling to maintain track through the chaff and rapid altitude change. But descending solves one problem while creating another. His RWR screams a new warning. Buck M3 acquisition radar, much closer, scanning in rapid bursts. He's dropped straight into its optimal engagement envelope. The Buck M3 you see here specializes in destroying aircraft between 15,000 and 30,000 feet, exactly where he just placed himself. Unlike the long-range S-400, which requires time to calculate intercepts, the Buck can engage in under 20 seconds at this range. The GPS pre-alignment sequence for the JDAMs must happen now. Each bomb needs a full satellite lock and position update to achieve its advertised 5-meter accuracy. He levels out at 20,000 feet, flying straight for 15 crucial seconds while the weapons computers talk to space. The alignment bar creeps across his display. 40%, 60%, 80%. New contact, an Su-35. It's 60 kilometers and closing at Mach 1.4. At this rate, the Russian fighter will be within R-77 missile range in 3 minutes. The GPS alignment completes just as his missile approach warning system detects the Su-35's radar positioning from search to track mode. Time to move. He banks hard right, then immediately reverses, creating an S-turn that forces the Buck operators to restart their firing solution. But each defensive maneuver burns fuel that he'll need for the return flight. The gauge already shows 200 kilograms below planned consumption. If this keeps up, he'll have to choose between completing the mission or having enough fuel to make it home. The Su-35 pilot is good. Instead of pursuing directly, he's calculating an intercept vector that will put his MiG between the fighter and the S-400 battery, a classic hammer and anvil technique. The Su-35 would drive him toward the S-400's kill zone like a sheepdog herding prey. Turn away from the fighter, fly into the SAM. Evade the SAM, give the fighter an easy shot. There are no good options. The target data from Malinivka glows on his display. Satellite imagery from 6 hours ago shows vehicle movement consistent with a major ammunition transfer. The 39th Guards are stockpiling for a push towards Pokrovsk. This strike could cripple their offensive for weeks. But reaching the target would mean threading through interlocking SAM sites with an Su-35 behind him and his fuel gauge close to red. But just as he calculated his attack vector, GPS jamming suddenly hits like a sledgehammer. His navigation display fuzzes with static as Russian electronic warfare units flood all frequencies with noise. The JDAM-ER bombs automatically switch to backup INS mode, but accuracy degrades instantly from 3-meter CEP to 10 meters. Against a hardened bunker, that might mean the difference between destruction and a very expensive crater in the parking lot. The MAU-12 ejector racks, which are NATO standard bomb release mechanisms, chose this exact moment to throw a fault code. Ukrainian technicians had promised the voltage regulators would hold, but combat has a way of finding every weak point. The pilot faces an impossible choice. Resetting the weapons system means turning off his defensive suite for 30 seconds. No radar warning. No countermeasures, flying blind while an Su-35 stalks him and SAM sites track his every move. But without that reset, the bombs won't release at all. He starts the reset sequence, watching his defensive displays go dark one by one. The sudden loss of jamming power has an immediate effect. Without electronic noise blinding its sensors, the Panzer's thermal cameras can now clearly distinguish his engine heat from the background. The electro-optical system doesn't care about jamming, it sees heat, and the MiG's engines burn bright against the cold sky. 20 seconds into the reset, he spots the missile launch through his canopy. Two 57 E-6 missiles climbing fast, their boost motors painting bright lines against the afternoon haze. No warning tone. His RWR is still rebooting. He brakes hard left, yanking the stick into his stomach while rolling inverted. 7 Gs crush him into the seat as the MiG enters a defensive barrel roll. The maneuver saves his life, but it costs him precious fuel. The afterburners gulp 360 kilograms in 40 seconds of maximum performance maneuvering. His fuel state drops dangerously close to bingo, the minimum needed to reach friendly territory. From here on out, every defensive move means less chance of making it home. His systems finally come back online just as the Panzer missiles detonate behind him, their proximity fuses triggered by his chaff cloud. But the optical lock remains. He dumps flares in desperation. The burning magnesium creates false targets. It works, but now he's broadcasting in both radar and infrared spectrums. Every sensor in the theater knows exactly where he is. The voltage regulators stabilize, displaying a green status across the board. 3 years ago, mounting American precision weapons on Soviet fighters was pure fantasy. Now Ukrainian technicians perform miracles daily. Target update arrives via encrypted data link. The ammunition dump at Malinivka has received additional vehicles in the last hour. Intelligence confirms elements of the 110th Guards Motor Rifle Brigade have joined the 39th Guards. 2 elite units are preparing for something big. The strike value just doubled. But reaching the release point means threading between overlapping SAM zones while the Su-35 closes from behind. The Russian pilot has been patient, maintaining a 40-kilometer standoff while ground-based defenses do the dangerous work. Smart tactics. He'll wait for an opening. As he closes the target area, his fuel state is at 2,400 kilograms, barely enough for a straight-line flight home. Any more maneuvering means landing on fumes, if he lands at all. The JDAMs need to be released in the next 4 minutes, or the entire mission will fail. But what happens next will test every system on his aircraft and push both man and machine past their limits. The Su-35 makes its move, 40 kilometers behind him. The Russian pilot switches from search to single-target track mode. The Ukrainian pilot's RWR screams the distinctive tone of an NO-35 Urbis E radar in firing position. In seconds, an R-77 will be in the air, a missile that can pull 40 Gs and doesn't care about chaff or flares once its active seeker goes live. The pilot brakes perpendicular to the threat, forcing the radar to work harder to maintain lock. This notching maneuver puts him at 90 degrees to the radar beam, where the missile's Doppler system can't distinguish his movement from ground clutter. However, this defensive geometry takes him directly over a Tor M2 battery that's been waiting in electromagnetic silence. The moment he crosses into its engagement zone, the system springs to life, well within the 9M338 missile's lethal radius. He's caught between converging fires, defend against the Su-35 behind, or fly into the Tor ahead, or maintain course and eat missiles from both directions. The target is still 90 kilometers away, too far for JDAM release, even with their extended range kit. He needs to get closer, but physics and geography are conspiring against him. The only option is to thread the needle. He rolls inverted and poles, entering a split S that drops him toward the deck. The half-loop maneuver rapidly trades altitude for a reverse direction, from heading north at 15,000 feet to heading south at 10,000 feet in seconds. The maneuver places terrain between him and the Tor, forcing the Su-35 to adjust its firing solution. However, diving means denser air, increased fuel burn, and reduced glide range for the JDAMs. Every meter of altitude lost is a meter less standoff distance at release. Passing through 15,000 feet, the pilot deploys his full flare suite. 60 burning pellets scatter behind the MiG, each one a false target for infrared seekers. The move saves him from the Tor's backup optical tracker, but creates a new problem. The Su-35's OLS-35 IRST system locks onto the flare cloud and then filters through the decoys to identify the real heat source. Now the Russian has a passive track, no radar emissions to warn of missile launch. He switches on the targeting pod to verify his aim point. He'll need visual confirmation before release. The targeting pod struggles at this altitude and angle. The Soviet-era optics are trying to designate a building 80 kilometers away through afternoon haze. The image wavers and pixelates, barely showing the ammunition depot's outline. But the JDAMs don't need a perfect picture, just coordinates accurate to within their CEP. The display shows 5 meters. That's close enough for government work. A pre-release checklist runs through his mind while missiles close in from 2 directions. GPS antenna alignment, complete but degraded by jamming. Weapon fuses, armed for delayed penetration. Release parameters, marginal at best. Every second of straight flight improves accuracy, but gives the Su-35 a predictable target, and the Russian finally takes the shot. A single R-77 leaves its rails. The missile appears on his scope, already accelerating past Mach 4. Impact in 58 seconds. He forces himself to hold course for 3 more precious seconds, letting the JDAM's computers refine the targeting solution. 15 kilometers to the release point. The weapons can glide from here, but accuracy suffers. But he doesn't have that luxury. The straight line also provides the Tor with a solution, and it fires. 2 missiles, staggered launch, different intercept vectors. The first missile forces him to brake in one direction, putting him exactly where the second missile expects him to be 3 seconds later. He has 7 seconds to solve an equation with no good answers. Fuel reads 1,900 kilograms. The afterburners are drinking his lifeline home. Every pilot knows the math. Speed is life. Altitude is life insurance. Fuel is time. He's spending all 3 accounts at once, betting everything on reaching weapon release before the balance hits 0. Decision time. Commit to the attack run and trust in speed and countermeasures, or abort and try to survive the gauntlet home with nothing to show for it. The ammunition dump waits 70 kilometers ahead. The R-77 closes from behind. The Tor missiles climb from below. He's got 5 seconds to make a decision that would either save his life or doom him and his mission. He commits. Full afterburner, nose down 10 degrees, racing toward the release point while death closes in from 3 directions. The R-77 has gone active, its seeker head painting the MiG with its own radar. The missile no longer needs the Su-35 to guide it in. Its internal radar has taken over for the intercept. No more hiding. The missile knows exactly where he is. Time to release. He hits the release button at exactly 14:47. Nothing happens. The first JDAM hangs on its pylon. The MAU-12 ejector mechanism frozen. Voltage fault. Mechanical failure. Act of God. It doesn't matter. The bomb refuses to leave while missiles scream toward him from every direction. The pilot cycles the release, hammering the button while G-forces crush him into a defensive brake turn. The R-77 adjusts course, pulling impossible angles that would snap a manned aircraft in half. 10 seconds to impact. The Tor missiles climb through 8,000 feet, their proximity fuses armed and searching. 5 seconds to impact. He's still carrying ordnance that should already be gliding toward the target. Time for manual override. He yanks the emergency release handle, feeling the mechanical linkage force the stubborn ejector open. The first JDAM finally separates, its wings deploying as the bomb enters its program glide. But the release happens during a 7G turn, way outside normal parameters. The weapon tumbles briefly before the brain catches up, GPS receivers fighting to relocate satellites through the spinning. The second bomb releases clean, thank God. Both JDAMs are now autonomous, their computers calculating glide paths while he fights for his life. The weapons initially diverge, confused by the off-axis release, then slowly converge on their target coordinates, now 60 kilometers away. The R-77 arrives. Sokil pulls maximum Gs, vision tunneling to a gray straw. The missile's proximity fuse calculates the intercept, waits for an optimal fragment pattern, then detonates. Shrapnel tears through the MiG's tail section, puncturing hydraulic lines and severing control cables. The aircraft shudders but keeps flying. Barely. Diving for the deck saves him from the Tor missiles, which lose track in ground clutter. But now he faces a new threat, Shilka anti-aircraft guns protecting the target area. 4 23mm cannons per vehicle, radar-guided, filling the sky with tungsten. He's too low to evade, too damaged to climb, and burning his last fuel reserves just to maintain a steady course. The JDAMs continue their silent journey, adjusting course every few seconds. The GPS jamming has corrupted their primary navigation, forcing them to rely on backup INS. But these are smart weapons in the truest sense. They compare terrain features against stored maps, refining their position estimate. At 14:53, the first JDAM reaches Malinivka. The 500-pound warhead carrying 192 pounds of tritonal explosive detonates inside the ammunition storage facility. Then the secondaries begin. Artillery shells cook off in chain reactions. Grad rockets explode in their storage crates. Small arms ammunition creates a crackling symphony of destruction. The blast throws a BTR-82 50 meters, its 8-ton mass tumbling like a toy. Windows shatter 5 kilometers away as the shockwave expands outward. 45 seconds later, the second JDAM strikes the command post. The building housing coordination between the 39th and the 110th Guards simply ceases to exist. Communication equipment, planning documents, everything, all vaporized in an instant. The elite brigades are suddenly scrambling their careful offensive planning and ammo stockpile, reduced to smoke and chaos. The MiG pilot uses the massive smoke column as cover, limping toward Ukrainian airspace at an altitude of 200 meters. His MiG trails hydraulic fluid, the control stick fighting him with every input. Fuel gauge reads 400 kilograms, 10 minutes of flight if he's gentle, 5 minutes if he needs afterburner. The Russian Su-35 turns back rather than pursue into Ukrainian SAM coverage. Malinivka burns. Secondary explosions continue for hours, each blast representing tons of ammunition that won't reach Ukrainian front lines. The planned offensive toward Pokrovsk goes up in smoke, all thanks to 2 American bombs delivered from a Soviet fighter held together by Ukrainian ingenuity. Bye for now.